Welcome to the Reddit Ranger. This is r/DNDStories, where OP betrays his friends for their own good. Here we have this story by Electrobrine. Waterdeep Dragon Heist Shenanigans. This is going to be my first time posting here, as I normally don't have anything I would deem interesting enough to warrant making a post. This week's session was different. Be warned, there might be some mild spoilers for the Waterdeep Dragon Heist module. So if you want to play that totally blind, you have been warned. The session starts with the party using a Nimblewright finder to search for the Nimblewright that took the Stone of Galar from the Grolhund Manor. They eventually find the Nimblewright and begin to interrogate it. After a little while of asking questions, the rogue, named Randall Dundragon, decided to cast Disguise Self to look like Mrs. Grolhund to trick the Nimblewright into leading them to where it took the stone. So the Nimblewright leads them to Grinda's residence in Mistshore. This is where the shenanigans begin. They come to find 5 bandits trying to knock down Grinda's door, and after one of the fighters, named Aaron Wuglim, exchanges some fighting words with the bandit captain, combat begins. It starts with Aaron Wuglim and the paladin named Fiven laying into our bandit captain. Now the sorcerer named Sir Izikvanter takes his turn and he casts Burning Hands, which roasts the 4 bandits that failed their saves to a crisp, does some light damage to the bandit captain, and also hurts Aaron Wuglim and Fiven. But Sir Izikvanter is a wild magic sorcerer, so he turns into a potted plant in the process. Randall then spends his turn casting Mage Hand to lift the now potted plant sorcerer into the air so that it will fall on the bandit captain's head. So then it rolls around to Sir Izikvanter's turn again, and he now changes back from being a potted plant, but that also means Mage Hand can't support him anymore, so he falls. While falling, Sir Izikvanter casts Lightning Lure to pull the bandit captain that is currently fighting Fiven up into the air and suplex them into the ground, except for Wild Magic, which once again activates, turning Sir Izikvanter back into Sir Potted Plant. The bandit captain falls on his face and dies from the fall since he was already super low in HP right in front of Fiven. And since Sir Izikvanter is now a potted plant, he takes double damage from the fall, making him take 26 damage after falling on Fiven below, which is slightly over his current HP, putting Izikvanter into death saves. With combat over now, Fiven puts some HP back into Iskavanter. Is it Iskavanter or Izikvanter? Because it's been spelled multiple different times throughout this whole story. It's been spelled Izikvanter at least twice. I'm sticking, I was gonna stick with Izikvanter, but Iskavanter, that rolls off the tongue a bit better. I'm gonna stick with that now. I'm not gonna correct the other ones just because. Fiven puts some HP back into Iskavanter to pick him back up while also using what's left to bring up his HP a little bit. Now, Randall Dundragon, still disguised as Mrs. Grolhund, tries to get into Grinda's house. The door is locked and he heard Grinda yell at him to go away, so he tries to pick the lock. One successful lockpick later, and Randall Dundragon gets a face full of firebolt and a door slammed in his face. So Randall Dundragon does the only logical thing in that situation: climb onto the roof and tear it apart to throw a Molotov cocktail inside the tiny house. While this is happening, Aaron Wuglim, Fiven, and our second fighter, named Fen Rao, and Sir Iskavanter prepare to bust in through a side door on Grinda's house, SWAT team style. Randall Dundragon throws his Molotov cocktail in through the roof, lighting the entire room ablaze, causing Grinda to run out the front door. Moments later, our SWAT team busts through the side door to find the entire room a fiery inferno. Fortunately, Sir Iskavanter has a decanter of endless water and puts the room out. While that is happening, Randall Dundragon has leapt from the roof and tackled Grinda to the ground. He calls for some help from the rest of the party, which gets shortly answered by Aaron Wuglim, who in full chainmail decides to doggy pile on top of Randall Dundragon and Grinda. Sir Iskavanter then searches the room he just put out and finds a small chest. He successfully picks the lock and activates the explosive runes on the chest. This turns the little hut into a large ball of fire. Noticing there's a lot of fire in this story. Sir Iskavanter gets cooked crispy and is thrown on death saves. Fiven survives with a single HP. Aaron Wuglim, being on top of the doggy pile, takes the full damage to try and shield his ally from the blast. Randall Dundragon gets shielded from most of the damage thanks to Aaron, and Fenrau rolls a nat 20 on his dex saves, so he hardly takes any damage at all. Fortunately, Fivin still has some healing spells, so he gets Sir Iskavanter out of death saves again. While that happens, Aaron is tying up the now unconscious Grinda and asks Randall Dundragon if he should break her bones so she can't escape. Questioning that lawful good alignment there, Aaron, they decide not to break her bones, thank goodness, and instead take their new guest, Grinda, back to the Troll Skull to ask questions later. They all then take a long rest and end the session there. Oh boy, that was a session. And down below we've got this comment from C41IC0. Love the story. A friend of mine once told me that lawful good does not mean lawful nice. So even though breaking some dude's legs so he can't escape is a bit questionable, technically speaking it wouldn't impede his alignment. I presume they were hired to find this guy. My character pretended to betray the party, then break them out of jail. Backstory. I'm playing Jaden, a former villain undergoing a redemption arc. He was a risky character to play considering he was still a villain back when I introduced him, and the DM and I engineered it so he was blackmailed into working with the party against his will, having a change of heart as time went on and continuing to work with them even after the blackmail stopped affecting him. And yesterday I had a chance to prove how committed he now is to the party. Granted, a lot of it backfired in terms of his plan, but it still made for an incredibly exciting session. So, on our trip, we were ambushed by the villainous organization my character used to work for. They were utter badasses, and we were hopelessly outmatched. One of our PCs had already been knocked out in one round and was about to be captured, which we'd all planned as a group. The goal was for this session to involve breaking them out of jail. Our only hope was to run away, but looking at the situation, both me and Jaden were very skeptical of our chances. And as far as he knew, the villains would instantly kill us if they knocked us out. So he hatched a plan on the fly. He turned on his allies and made sure to knock them out safely. His plan was to convince the villains to take them alive instead. But as it turns out, that was their plan anyway. No problem, it would still be useful for Jaden to break them out of jail later. However, one of the PCs and an NPC escaped, which wasn't part of the plan. It's worth noting that, out of character, I didn't share my plan with anyone but the DM. Jaden is a complicated and often unpredictable character. His redemption had been slow, and he still wrestles with his darker sides. So I was hoping to briefly convince them he'd fully fallen back to his old habits. Since the villains didn't know of Jaden's redemption, they had no trouble buying his sudden turn. They welcomed him back with open arms. As soon as he reached their base, Jaden got to work. He started trying to figure out where the other prisoners were being held, so he could sneak them out the back with no fuss. However, there were two things he wasn't counting on. One, the cells weren't easy to find, and there came a point where he couldn't keep searching without being suspicious. Two, the escaped PC and NPC just so happened to have a lot of connections and were also insanely stubborn, so they hatched a rescue operation despite the bad odds. Meanwhile, Jaden called some old frenemies who had it out for the group he used to be a part of, requesting their assistance. They started their attack at the same time as the rescue operation did. Once they did, Jaden used it as a distraction to make his way to the prisoners. Said prisoners started an escape attempt on their own. Multiple schemes were set in motion at the same time, and the result was glorious. The PC's initial escape attempt succeeded, but they were then cornered by a boss who'd previously kicked their behinds. At the last moment, Jaden showed up to assist, saving them, but getting his own butt kicked. The escape that should have been quiet and subtle turned into a desperate struggle against multiple OP bosses. Our group was split up, and we were fighting multiple bosses designed to hold their own against the full party. We were trying to keep them at bay while running away. Jaden got knocked out and injured, but the rest of the party managed to reunite and either defeat or avoid the enemies they were fighting. One of the bosses was even talked into standing down. Afterwards, the other PCs were really pissed at Jaden for the stunt he pulled. Only in character. Out of character, the players loved it, which was kind of a bummer considering I intended this to be his heroic moment. But it still made for an incredible session, and it triggered some interesting development in Jaden moving forward. Mainly his insecurities about how useful he really is to the party. It was super interesting for Jaden to pretend to be evil again. Up until now, he was terrified of himself, of his own potential for evil. He thought that, given the chance, he may very well turn on the party for real. But now, he had everything to gain by betraying them for real, but he had no trouble making the right decision anyway. Now he knows for sure that he's changed, but the failure of his plan and the fact that he ultimately made things more difficult for everyone, which isn't the first time either, is making him question whether he deserves his redemption to begin with. That was r/D&D stories, and remember, if you want to help me with my character development, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe.